People came here to reach for the stars, so to speak, to have freedom. It was known as the land of the free and the home of the brave. But many of us that immigrated here to the United States and have become citizens have questioned, did we make a good decision to come here? Is this a great country after all? Those are the questions that are looming in people's heads right now. And if you're like me, you're strongly questioning whether or not that was a good decision or not. Leaving one's country to align with another country, pledge your allegiance to a new flag, that's a very big deal for many of us that are immigrants. And those of you that are not immigrants and can't understand the plight and to understand why many people risk coming to America and trying to start a life here, you would never understand that it's not only because of freedom, but it was because of the ability to live a life of possible upward mobility and to know that the country that you pledged your allegiance to wants you to succeed. Rome fell because of the same things that are being enacted today by our US government. Why did Rome fail? In the end, you realize that it's always history repeating itself. Sure, Rome had a lot of leaders that were corrupt and evil and shameful, but still, the empire crumbled because of the same principles and same lack of moral codes that are happening today in the United States. People have put their pleasure and their greed above the needs of mankind, and therefore we'll see the collapse of the United States just as we did with Rome. Many empires, like the Roman Empire that lasted 1400 years, or the Byzantine Empire that lasted 1100 years, or the Ottoman Empire, or the Qing dynasty that fell only after 250 years, or the British Empire that lasted 400 years. The Spanish Empire lasted only 450 years. And despite what some people may think, the Persian Empire only lasted 200 years. Let's not forget about the Egyptian Empire, which actually lasted the longest at 3,000 years. As of today, America has only been a country in existence for 246 years. The United States only became a superpower at the end of World War II in 1945, despite it being a nation since 1776 with the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which gave us our freedom from Great Britain. By the end of World War II, the United States had risen as an industrial superpower, and the reason why was because of its military force, of course, and it wasn't ravished by World War as the other nations were. After World War II, the United States played major roles in international affairs, as well as starting the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. It was the driving force behind NATO. The U.S. was a major player in the Cold War, which lasted from the 1940s after World War II all the way into the 90s. So you see, we've had a long-standing rivalry with the Soviet Union or Russia. Looking at the historical context of why empires fail, there obviously are many reasons, right? Some of the obvious ones are overextension, meaning they overextend themselves on their resources, either through military conquests or trying to get extra territories. Sometimes trying to gain control over a large territory is actually going to be to your detriment. We saw that with the Roman Empire. They were so big that it became kind of hard to control some of the factions within that empire. Sometimes it's brought on by environmental things that are not in your control, like drought, famine, disease, natural disasters, things of that nature that can bring down an entire empire. These factors can disrupt food production. They can cause population displacement and strain resources as well. Some people have claimed that the Mayan civilization ended due to all of these external factors. We can talk about external threats from other neighboring civilizations or dynasties or empires. Talk about internal unrest, and obviously there are some nations that are better at dealing with internal unrest than others by using strong force, taking away gun rights or rights to bear arms so that people cannot defend themselves, and sometimes even going with the extreme of just killing their own people. Internal unrest, such as civil unrest, social unrest, political instability, and rebellion can destabilize countries and make their entire nation fall, as we are seeing in France right now. Some of those internal unrest can also align with religious freedoms. You start taking away people's religious freedoms and their right to pray to whatever God they choose, and you can see mayhem start from that, as we have witnessed in Israel right now. Think about that, right? A whole community is embroiled in this sort of mayhem, all because the leaders or the people in power want to enact things that people are just not willing to go with. We could talk about economic inequality and government corruption, but I think many of you guys are privy to that by now. One of the biggest ones, though, is economics, such as inflation or fiscal mismanagement, reliance on a single industry. In the case of many countries, they rely solely on tourism or something like that. Here in America, it seems that with all of the fires and explosions, you wonder who's actually investigating it. It's definitely not Pete Buttigieg. He is not investigating anything about the train incidents. We've heard nothing. A lot of silence from our media, which is controlled by our government. And so a lot of us are left in the dark. And once you start leaving people in the dark, once you start closing down questions and shutting down people's inquiries into these things, that's when you start to see civil unrest. Overall, the downfall of empires have always been a very complex issue, an interplay, so to speak, of some of those things I've mentioned. The main thing is that these things can cause food shortages.
A long discussion in the G7 we both talked about how we could increase and disseminate more rapidly food shortages in addition.
And population displacement. And overall, the biggest one is resources. So once people are limited and do not have access to resources, a living wage, being able to support themselves, education, things of that matter, we start to see these empires just fall. And I don't know about you guys, but we're entering a time right now where if some of us are not questioning or not doing anything about these things, not contacting our congressmen and women or senators or reaching out and extending an invite to people who do not think like us, if we don't get to that point where we have some sort of sensibility about us to realize that we're not always right, and it's sometimes good to listen to opposing views. If we get to that point, we are destined for failure, just as all the other empires that came and fell before us. And as I mentioned, and the reason I wanted to do that just brief breakdown, of course, there's many other empires and dynasties that came and went. We didn't talk about the Mongols. We didn't talk about a bunch of other dynasties, right? I just wanted to point out that some of them only lasted 200 to 250 years. So we're right on that trajectory, guys, for us to be on the brink of collapse. So I don't put it past anything this year that we could be looking at the demise of the United States. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer about it, but if I were you, I would be looking at other countries to live in or some other places to move. And it does make me really sad to know that I came to this country with the idea that it was going to be the land of milk and honey and, golden streets, and it was none of that. Anyways, remember to think for yourself and have a great day.